The Middle Passage was one of the darkest chapters in human history. A journey marked by unimaginable hardship and suffering, packed tightly into ships with little ventilation, minimal food, and unsanitary conditions. Enslaved Africans faced a perilous voyage across the Atlantic. Yet, amidst this harrowing ordeal, some individuals managed to survive. How did they endure conditions that claimed so many lives? One key factor was their remarkable resilience to disease. Conditions aboard these ships were perfect breeding grounds for illnesses like dysentery, smallpox, and malaria. Those who were younger, healthier, and physically strong often had a better chance of surviving the relentless spread of disease, making resilience a critical element of survival. Survival was not merely physical. It also demanded extraordinary mental fortitude. The constant fear, trauma, and uncertainty could break even the strongest minds. Yet many held on through hope, solidarity, and spiritual practices passed down through generations. These small acts of courage, from sharing limited food rations to offering comfort and protection to one another, created lifelines amid chaos. Understanding how some survived the Middle Passage is not just about remembering the horrors, it is about honoring human endurance, resilience, and the will to live even under the most inhumane circumstances. In this video, we will explore these stories of survival, highlighting the strength and determination of those who endured what many could not. If you find this story compelling and want to learn more about the untold chapters of history, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos uncovering the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The journey across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage, tested every ounce of human endurance, demanding not only mental fortitude but an extraordinary level of physical resilience. The ships themselves were overcrowded, with hundreds of people confined to spaces barely large enough to sit or lie down, where the air was thick with heat, dampness, and the stench of sickness. Those who survived were often the ones whose bodies could endure this constant strain, whose muscles and bones were strong enough to withstand the unrelenting pressure of the cramped conditions, and whose lungs could tolerate the heavy, stagnant air filled with the germs of countless diseases. Malnutrition added another layer of challenge. The meager rations provided were insufficient for maintaining strength. Yet those who could adapt to eating what little was offered, conserving energy where possible, were more likely to persist when others succumbed to exhaustion or illness. Strength, however, went beyond mere physicality. The ability to move, shift, and stretch within the tight confines was essential, as was the capacity to survive without collapsing under the oppressive weight of heat, human bodies, and despair. Each day brought new tests. The relentless sway of the ship in turbulent waters, the sudden outbreaks of illness that swept through sections of the hold, and the constant risk of being injured in the crush of people desperate to find a little space or access to a scarce morsel of food. Some found ways to protect themselves, curling into positions that minimized exposure to harm, while others relied on their natural stamina and health to endure the suffocating, exhausting routine. Beyond physical strength, survival often required attentiveness and a degree of strategy. Those who could carefully navigate the small spaces, avoiding both the spread of disease and the harsh discipline of the crew, improved their chances of lasting the voyage. Some learned to share small acts of support with neighbors, offering a hand or a word to maintain balance and morale, which in turn helped their own bodies cope with the strain. The physical resilience of these individuals intertwined with mental determination, forming a fragile shield against the overwhelming odds stacked against them. In many cases, survival was also about timing and circumstance. The ability to endure the moments that others could not, to persist through the peaks of suffering that seemed insurmountable. The body's ability to adapt to survive without adequate nutrition, to withstand constant motion and discomfort, And to resist the onset of disease long enough to reach safer conditions was often what distinguished those who survived from those who did not. Each individual who made it to the end of the Middle Passage carried within them a story of extraordinary bodily endurance, a testament to the human capacity to survive under the most severe conditions imaginable, and a reminder that resilience is not only a matter of spirit but a profound physical struggle as well. The tales of survival are woven together through these shared experiences of endurance, illustrating that the journey was not merely a passage across water, but a test of the human body itself. It is through this lens of physical resilience that the strength of those who survived can be truly understood, honoring not only their courage but the remarkable tenacity that allowed them to endure the Middle Passage against seemingly insurmountable odds. The Middle Passage was a voyage defined by extremes, where the limits of human endurance were tested not only by overcrowding, disease, and harsh conditions but also by the scarcity of sustenance. The rations provided to enslaved Africans were minimal, often consisting of a thin gruel or small portions of dried grains, occasionally supplemented with water that was far from clean. These meager provisions were designed more to prevent immediate death than to sustain health, leaving those aboard in a constant struggle against hunger, dehydration, and the debilitating effects of malnutrition. Yet, survival depended in large part on the ability to make the most of what little was available, to eat sparingly but consistently, and to conserve energy whenever possible. Those who could manage this delicate balance sometimes found themselves among the fortunate few who endured the full voyage. The act of eating became more than a routine. It was a daily test of resilience and careful calculation. Individuals had to compete subtly for their share, navigating the chaotic environment without drawing the attention of the crew, who might punish perceived disobedience or wastefulness. For some, survival hinged on the ability to eat quickly, store small portions mentally or physically, and endure long periods without food between brief opportunities to access the ship's limited supplies. Dehydration, exacerbated by the oppressive heat and lack of ventilation, added another layer of peril, making the ability to sip and ration water a skill that could mean the difference between life and death. The challenge of limited food was compounded by the body's struggle to maintain strength under relentless stress. Weakness could make an individual more susceptible to disease, injury, or even the physical pressures of overcrowding. Yet, those who could preserve their energy, nourish themselves with the smallest scraps, and endure the monotony of repetitive meals often retained enough vitality to withstand both physical and mental hardships. In some instances, enslaved Africans found ways to share morsels with others, forming fragile networks of mutual support that bolstered both morale and survival odds. Eating became entwined with strategy, endurance, and observation. Survival was not simply a matter of consuming food, but of understanding the rhythms of the ship, the timing of meal distribution, and the dangers of exposure or punishment during attempts to secure nourishment. Those who mastered this delicate navigation of scarcity increased their chances of surviving the journey, their resilience amplified not only by physical strength and disease resistance but also by the careful management of what little the ship allowed them. Ultimately, the struggle over food and water aboard the Middle Passage was inseparable from the broader challenges of survival. It demanded adaptability, foresight, and endurance, reinforcing the interconnectedness of physical strength, mental resilience, and sheer determination. Each individual who managed to sustain themselves despite the starvation and dehydration pressures carried forward a story of extraordinary perseverance, a testament to the human will to survive in circumstances deliberately designed to crush it. Their ability to endure these hardships highlights the profound and often overlooked strategies of survival that existed amid the unimaginable cruelty of the Middle Passage, illuminating a facet of history where resilience in the smallest daily acts became a matter of life and death. The Middle Passage was a crucible of human suffering where survival demanded not only physical strength and the ability to endure hunger and disease, but also a remarkable capacity to navigate the relentless pressures of extreme overcrowding. The holds of the ships were filled far beyond what any human body could comfortably bear, with hundreds of people packed tightly together, lying shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee, often unable to move without disturbing those around them. In this suffocating environment, enslaved Africans developed coping mechanisms born of necessity, instincts that allowed them to endure and, in some cases, survive the journey. Those who managed to maintain a sense of calm amidst the chaos, who learned to find small ways to adjust their positions to reduce discomfort, and who could share limited space with a neighbor without conflict, often faced fewer injuries and greater chances of survival. The act of sharing space became an essential skill, a silent understanding that to protect oneself, one had to protect others as well. Individuals who were strong enough to help shift someone who had collapsed or to cushion a fall when the ship rolled during storms were inadvertently safeguarding their own survival. In many cases, the physically weaker children, the elderly, or those already ill relied on the subtle assistance of neighbors, and those who offered help often created informal networks of support that could preserve life, even in the darkness of the holds, where human bodies pressed against one another in unending rows. Small acts of solidarity could mitigate the worst effects of crushing confinement, preventing injuries that might otherwise become fatal in a place where medical care was non-existent. Mental resilience intertwined with these physical strategies. Remaining calm under such oppressive conditions was itself a skill, a way to conserve energy and avoid panic that could lead to suffocation or injury. Some developed routines, quietly shifting positions in rhythm with the ship's motion. Whispering encouragement, or using familiar songs and prayers to maintain a fragile sense of order and control. These strategies, though subtle, created pockets of safety and predictability in an environment designed to strip people of both. Navigating the overcrowded hold also required vigilance and patience. Quick reflexes could prevent being trampled or crushed during moments of sudden movement, and a careful awareness of one's surroundings could help avoid the spread of disease in the tightly packed quarters. In a space where the proximity of so many bodies accelerated illness, those who maintained even the smallest degree of hygiene, or who could isolate themselves slightly when someone fell ill, improved their odds of surviving the journey. Each decision, each adjustment of posture or shared effort to protect a neighbor, was part of a delicate balance between endurance, cooperation, and strategy. In essence, the strategies that enslaved Africans developed to cope with overcrowding were an extension of their resilience, a testament to human adaptability under extreme duress. These coping mechanisms highlight how survival was never solely a matter of physical strength or access to food and water, but was also rooted in social intelligence, empathy, and the ability to navigate chaos with composure. Each individual who endured the oppressive confinement of the Middle Passage carried with them not only the scars of the journey, but also the evidence of extraordinary human ingenuity and solidarity, showing that even in the darkest conditions, survival depended as much on the ways people supported one another as on the strength of their own bodies. Survival during the Middle Passage demanded more than physical resilience or the ability to endure hunger, dehydration, and overcrowding. It required an extraordinary depth of mental fortitude. Enslaved Africans were subjected to conditions designed to break not only the body but also the spirit. Yet many found ways to preserve a sense of hope and identity in the darkest of circumstances. The oppressive heat, suffocating holds, and relentless proximity to suffering could easily overwhelm anyone. Yet some clung to rituals and practices that reminded them of a world beyond the ship's walls. Spiritual customs. Prayers whispered quietly in the dark, or familiar songs offered a connection to home, ancestors, and a sense of continuity in a reality that threatened to erase all memory of their previous lives. Singing became more than an act of cultural preservation. It was a lifeline for the mind, a way to resist despair and maintain a sense of rhythm and order amidst chaos. Stories told quietly to one another, narratives of past endurance and survival, created bonds that were almost tangible, linking one person to another across the crowded, sweltering hold. These small social networks, built on trust and shared vulnerability, allowed individuals to navigate moments of panic, to shield one another from the worst effects of fear, and to create brief but meaningful reprieves from the suffocating conditions around them. The mental strategies employed were as essential to survival as physical strength or access to food, as they sustained the inner life of those trapped in conditions that were otherwise dehumanizing and relentless. Hope itself became an act of resistance. To envision a life beyond the voyage, to imagine reaching the Americas, to cling to the thought that family, freedom, or even a small measure of agency could exist once the journey ended, provided the determination needed to endure. Those who could cultivate this sense of hope often managed to preserve the energy and willpower necessary to survive the day-to-day horrors, to eat what little was provided, to shift and adjust in the cramped holds, and to care for themselves and others in the midst of illness and injury. Mental fortitude intertwined with physical endurance, creating a feedback loop in which a resilient mind could help the body withstand the extreme strain, and vice. Even small acts of social connection had immense significance. Offering comfort, sharing a story, or holding a hand became gestures of psychological survival, fortifying morale and reinforcing the shared humanity that the journey sought to erase. In this way, survival was never purely an individual endeavor. It depended on the subtle networks of support, encouragement, and shared resilience that existed among the captives, those who could maintain their inner life, their mental strength, and their social bonds were more likely to endure the relentless conditions of the Middle Passage, emerging on the other side not only alive but carrying the stories, songs, and practices that testified to human endurance. Through this lens, the Middle Passage can be seen not only as a voyage of suffering, but also as a testament to the profound resilience of the human mind. Those who survived did so through a combination of hope, spiritual practice, cultural memory, and mutual support, showing that even in the most oppressive circumstances, mental fortitude could preserve life, identity, and the will to continue against all odds. The Middle Passage was not only a test of physical endurance, mental fortitude, and the ability to survive disease and deprivation, but also a perilous negotiation with the ever-present threat posed by the crew. Enslaved Africans were confined in spaces controlled by men whose authority was absolute, and whose punishments were swift and brutal, often arbitrary and designed to instill fear. Every movement, every attempt to claim even a small measure of comfort or access to meager rations, carried the risk of drawing the crew ire. Survival demanded a delicate awareness, a kind of instinctive diplomacy, in which captives learned to navigate the unpredictable whims of their captors while still preserving enough strength to endure the long, grueling journey. Those who managed to avoid the worst punishments did so through a combination of observation, patience, and subtle compliance, understanding which behaviors might trigger violence and which might go unnoticed. Some learned to move quietly within the crowded holds, to shift without drawing attention, to anticipate moments when the crew would inspect or command, and to adjust their actions to avoid confrontation. For others, survival involved a careful balance between assertiveness and restraint, knowing when to act, when to remain still, and how to protect themselves without escalating the risk of retribution. In many, the journey became a constant negotiation, where awareness and caution were as essential as the ability to endure hunger, disease, or physical exhaustion. The psychological weight of this constant vigilance was immense. Every person had to weigh the immediate risk of punishment against long-term survival, to decide whether to move for comfort or to remain in place to avoid detection, to share food or to conserve it quietly. Those who could manage this tension, who could anticipate the crew's reactions and adjust their behavior accordingly, increased their chances of reaching the Americas alive. In some cases, small acts of compliance or deference were enough to deflect harsh treatment, allowing individuals to survive long enough for their physical and mental resilience to carry them through the voyage. Yet survival was never guaranteed, and the presence of a violent authority figure added a layer of unpredictability to an already harrowing journey. Even the strongest bodies and most hopeful minds could be undone by an unexpected lash, an unfair accusation, or the sheer randomness of selection for labor or punishment. Those who survived often did so through a combination of careful observation, quick reflexes, and an acute awareness of both opportunity and danger, demonstrating an extraordinary ability to navigate a world designed to strip them of control. The interplay between endurance and strategy illustrates that survival during the Middle Passage was as much about human perception, adaptability, and subtle social maneuvering as it was about physical health, access to food, or mutual support among captives. By understanding the environment, learning to read the moods and patterns of the crew, and choosing moments of action or inaction with care, enslaved Africans could minimize immediate threats, protect themselves and, when possible, others, and preserve the chance to survive a journey that sought to destroy every aspect of their being. The courage to endure violence, the wisdom to avoid it, and the presence of mind to navigate the perilous authority of the crew became as vital as any other survival skill on the Middle Passage, shaping the few who emerged alive from a voyage marked by overwhelming suffering. Amid the suffocating confines of the Middle Passage, where physical endurance, mental resilience, and constant vigilance were essential to survival, mutual support emerged as a quiet but powerful force, in an environment engineered to isolate individuals and reduce them to silence. Enslaved Africans often found strength in one another, forming bonds that helped sustain life when every other resource was scarce. Sharing food, caring for the sick, and offering protection from harm were not merely acts of kindness. They were strategies of survival rooted in collective solidarity. Food, already limited to the bare minimum, became a symbol of shared endurance. Those who managed to save a small portion of their ration, or who noticed a neighbor growing too weak to eat, sometimes made the decision to share, understanding that preserving another's strength could, in turn, stabilize the fragile balance of the group. A person too weak to sit upright or respond to commands risked punishment or neglect, which could quickly spread fear and disorder among those nearby. By helping one another remain functional, captives indirectly protected themselves, maintaining a sense of stability within the overcrowded hold. Care for the sick was another vital expression of solidarity. Illness spread quickly in the cramped, unsanitary conditions, and those who fell ill were especially vulnerable. Without medical attention, survival often depended on the quiet assistance of fellow captives who could offer water, adjust a body to ease breathing, or simply remain close to prevent isolation. These small acts, repeated day after day, could slow the progression of illness or help someone endure long enough to recover. In doing, they also reduced the risk of panic or despair rippling through the group, reinforcing a shared determination to survive. Protection took many forms, often subtle and improvised. In moments of tension or inspection, stronger individuals sometimes positioned themselves between vulnerable captives and potential danger, using their presence to shield others from being singled out. This was not always a conscious act of defiance, but an instinctive response shaped by shared suffering. Over time, informal networks formed, built on trust and familiarity, where individuals watched over one another, communicated quietly, and coordinated their movements to minimize risk. These networks complemented the mental strategies of hope, storytelling, and spiritual practice, grounding psychological resilience in tangible action. Collective solidarity also reinforced mental fortitude, knowing that one was not entirely alone, that someone nearby would notice weakness or distress, could sustain morale in an environment designed to extinguish it. The simple acknowledgement of another's presence, a whispered word, a shared rhythm of breathing or movement, helped preserve a sense of humanity. This shared humanity was essential, linking the physical struggle for survival with the psychological need for connection, and reinforcing the idea that endurance was a shared journey rather than an individual burden. Through mutual support, survival became a collective effort, shaped by cooperation as much as by individual strength. The ability to share scarce resources, care for the vulnerable, and protect one another from harm occasionally shifted the odds, allowing more people to endure the journey. These acts of solidarity did not erase the suffering of the Middle Passage, but they reveal a deeper truth about survival. Even in the most oppressive conditions, human connection could sustain life. The stories of those who survived are inseparable from the quiet, persistent bonds they formed, reminding us that resilience often grows strongest where people choose to stand together against overwhelming adversity. Despite every effort to endure, adapt, and resist despair, survival during the Middle Passage was never fully within human control. Even the strongest bodies, the sharpest instincts, and the deepest bonds of solidarity could be undone by forces no one could anticipate. Disease could spread suddenly through a ship, turning a fragile balance of survival into chaos within days. Storms could rise without warning, violently tossing vessels across the Atlantic, injuring those confined below deck and claiming lives without distinction. Accidents aboard the ship, from structural failures to moments of panic, reminded everyone that survival was not only earned through resilience and strategy, but was also shaped by chance. This element of unpredictability is what makes the stories of survival so haunting and so powerful. Two individuals might endure the same conditions, share the same strength, and rely on the same coping strategies, yet only one would survive. Luck determined whether a person fell ill during an outbreak or avoided infection, whether a storm struck their ship or passed them by, whether a moment of exhaustion coincided with danger or passed unnoticed. These uncontrollable factors underscore a painful truth. The Middle Passage was designed in a way that stripped people of agency, leaving survival vulnerable to forces far beyond human influence. Yet acknowledging the role of luck does not diminish the resilience of those who survived. Instead, it deepens our understanding of the immense courage required simply to endure each day, without knowing what the next might bring. Survival was not a reflection of worth, strength, or intelligence, but the outcome of a brutal system where human lives were treated as expendable. Those who emerged alive did so carrying not only their own endurance, but also the memory of countless others who did not, victims of circumstance as much as cruelty. The Middle Passage, then, is not just a story of suffering. It is a story of humanity tested at its limits. It reveals how people relied on their bodies, their minds, their communities, and sometimes sheer chance to survive a journey that reshaped history. Remembering these stories honors both the resilience of the survivors and the lives of those lost, reminding us why this history must be told with care, honesty, and respect. Thank you for listening and taking the time to reflect on this important chapter of history. If you found this story meaningful and want to explore more untold histories that shaped our world, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you can continue learning with us.